Thank you all for tuning in.
The following is a presentation of Bald Spots Productions.
Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people.
Yes, it is I, your humble host, Bill Hatch the Third, coming to you live from the palatial studios of Bald Spots Productions here in the beautiful city of Santa Ana, California. Joining me in studio, as per usual, for this episode of YWL Online. No, wrong show. I almost did it. Okay, no problem. Joining me in studio for another episode of Not Quite After Midnight is my friend, my brother in Christ, the disembodied voice of Rudy.
Hi, everybody. I love you all. Waka waka with the Lord.
And joining us from a more than acceptable safe social distance through the miracle of telephony is my guest for today, Jeff Rasley. How you doing, Jeff?
Hi, Bill. I'm good. Hello, Rudy. Happy to be with you.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you.
Now, my first question is the same in all the episodes of Not Quite After Midnight, and that is, what are you reading?
Well, I'm reading several things at the same time.
Okay.
I'm listening to an audiobook by a wonderful historical fiction writer, Bernard Cornwell, called Masters of War.
Okay.
And it's about a 13th or a 14th century knight who was fighting battles for King Edward of England and France. And I'm reading another book, which is actually a good friend of mine, and it's it's a nonfiction kind of theological, religious treatise. But the author is Chris Edwards, and unfortunately, I can't remember the title of the book. But it's a very interesting kind of philosophical discussion about the history of religion.
Okay, that actually sounds pretty interesting. Okay. Wow, that's a lot to keep in your brain all at once. No, that's really cool. Yeah, you do a lot of things. It seems. You were talking in your one sentence about that you teach a course in philanthropy at Butler University. Which sounds interesting. How do you teach philanthropy?
Well, I start out with the Old Testament in Deuteronomy 15, which is one of the earliest literary descriptions of how to do philanthropy, which is about the ancient Israeli or Israelite, I should say, tradition of the 7-year jubilee where all debts are forgiven. And the idea of that was poverty is often created through debt. And then I move forward from that into the ancient Greeks. We look at Plato's Republic, which set out sort of an economic system that was intended to create the perfect state where there would never be any poverty. And then we go to the New Testament, the Good Samaritan story, and learn how Jesus universalized the sort of a philanthropic ethic of helping anyone in need, because the ancient Greeks and the ancient Hebrews limited their philanthropic efforts to their own tribes. So it didn't apply to foreigners. And in Jesus's terms, it applies to everybody, that love your neighbor as yourself. And then we move forward into modern times, read some texts about current work in philanthropic organizations. We do a couple case studies on sort of how to do it wrong and how to do it right, and then end with a term paper where the students have to pick a topic that we've covered and develop it, or to develop their own approach to philanthropy and defend it with, footnotes and the typical college research term paper sort of stuff. So there's the course. You get 3 hours of credit from Butler.
Woohoo! Okay. No, that's awesome. That's a pretty in-depth look at the history of philanthropy, and all. Yeah, good. That's interesting. I may look deeper into that, especially into the biblical foundation. The other show that we do is a Christian, strictly Christian show, for anybody. But let's see. Okay. You are also president of the Bassa Village Foundation. What is Bassa Village?
Well, Bassa Village is a very remote area in the Nepal Himalayas.
Okay.
So there's a central village, but the Bassa is an area. It's sort of like a metropolitan area. Like, what we think of metropolitan doesn't really exist up in the Himalayas, and so I started a foundation which has a sister foundation of local people over there, and we work together to do infrastructure projects. So we built a school, a water project, electricity, various smaller projects for the school, a medical clinic. The main village got hit badly by earthquakes back in 2015. So we helped to fund rebuilding the homes that were damaged or destroyed in the earthquake. And our current project, which we just funded, is an economic development project where the village is going to obtain a small herd of goats and pigs and turn that into a commercial operation. So that's the Bassa Village Foundation USA. Our primary task is to raise money to fund projects that the local people and our sister foundation in Nepal have requested, and then we also provide expertise like engineering, medical, that sort of thing when it's needed.
That's really awesome. That actually fits in with a lot of my economic philosophy. Of helping people start businesses, not just giving them money to feed, to feed themselves for a week. Whatever. But yeah, I used to be involved in a group that did microloans to primarily third world individuals to start businesses, and that went on for a while. It was kind of an experiment, and they pulled it up because they were
instead of lending, we provide all the funds. So we pay for example, the electrical system. So we paid for all of the materials needed, but then the local people have to build it themselves. So they built their own school, they built their own electrical system, their water system, medical clinic, etc. When special skills are needed that the villagers don't have, we pay for those. Stone. Some of the projects required stone masons to come in from other villages, so we paid their wages. But essentially, the way our foundations work is we provide the funding, any expertise that's needed, and then the local people do all the work, and then they own the projects when they're finished. So they have their own school board, their own utility board, medical clinic board, because it's very important in doing that kind of work that the local people really feel a sense of ownership, and that it isn't a matter of just charity, that these outsiders come in, give them a bunch of money, or do things for them, and then they become dependent on us. So instead, they have to build it, and then they have to run it and own it. And I developed that philosophy towards doing philanthropy when I first started the Basa Foundation with my partner in Nepal, a guy named Niru Rai, who was the owner of a mountaineering and trekking company that I was using to do a mountain climb. And we hit it off and realized we both had sort of the same attitude towards this kind of mission work. And so we've been working together ever since, and we met in 2006.
That's awesome. I love what you're doing. Then let's see. What is the Science Tech Foundation, and how are you involved with them? It wasn't exactly clear.
Yeah, I'm the president of that foundation. It's based in Indiana, and what it does is it funds science, technology, engineering, mathematics, so STEM programs throughout Indiana, mostly in central Indiana. And so we have about a $3 million fund, and so we spin off $150,000 a year roughly, and we give that amount in grants each year to programs that we think are helping kids get interested in and learn about STEM. And so we've funded some schools, from public and private schools, like their science courses, if they say they needed computers. One of our recent projects was we bought 3D printers for a high school program. We paid for the parts needed for a couple different robotics teams. And we also fund a number of summer camps. I had never really heard of this before I got involved with the Science Tech Foundation, but a number of colleges, universities have summer STEM camps where they bring junior high or high school kids on their campus, have them spend a week or 2 weeks kind of immersed in doing experiments, water research, learning about flora and fauna, all kinds of different science kind of introduction to real doing hands-on science. And so we fund several of those camps.
Pretty cool. How did you get involved with Science Tech? What kicked that off?
Well, there's a club called the Science Tech Club, which is affiliated with the foundation. And so back in 2010, I retired from full-time law practice. A friend of mine said, well, you gotta find other things to do. And I'm a member of this club called Science Tech. Come and check out the club. So I went, and it's this wonderful club, mostly for retired people. And every single Monday, all year, it puts on an educational program, primarily about different topics in science. And then there's a lunch and social time. But so you get this learning experience, social time, meal, and it was really enjoyable. And pretty soon I found myself getting sucked into becoming the program chairman, then the vice president, then the president of the club, board member on the foundation, secretary of the foundation, vice president, and now I'm, as of this year, I'm president of the foundation. So that's just, what happens when people sense that you have some qualities of leadership and management, organizational skills, and if you have the time to volunteer them, that's the way it goes. So I'm on a couple other nonprofit boards. In fact, I'm only those two and two other nonprofit boards, because this is the fewest number of boards I've been on for decades. I've typically been on 6 or 7, mostly nonprofit, but some for-profit boards. So that's been a sort of a major focus of my professional life.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, how did you get the connections to start getting on these boards?
Well, when I was practicing law, many of them were clients of mine. So, for example, there was a visiting nurse service, and they retained me to do some legal work. Pretty soon asked me to be on their board. It's sort of like, now we've got our attorney on our board and we don't have to pay him while he's giving us free advice as a board member. And others just, people, organizations, for example. I'm an alumnus of the University of Chicago. They have a local alumni board, so I got into that, became president of that. Still on that board, but no longer president. So either it was some organization I was a member of, or was the attorney for, or just people knew me and asked me to participate.
Sorry about that. Dog's decided they wanted to be on the show.
Well, that's okay. I have a kitty cat that's been scratching at my door. I shut her out so she couldn't interrupt us.
Yeah, I haven't figured out how to keep the dogs out. They just scratch and howl, I think. But yeah, no, that's awesome, because I have a friend who started doing the whole getting on boards and CEOing and all that kind of stuff, and yeah, I'm always wondering how people get into it. But what kind of law did you practice?
I had, for most of my 30 years in law, a general practice.
Okay.
I started out sort of a legal idealistic crusader. Worked for an organization called Legal Services Organization. We did poverty law cases and class action social justice cases. Did that for a few years. Then went over to the dark side of a big corporate law firm practice, sort of learned the business side of it. And they kept trying to pigeonhole me into, narrow specialization, which I fought off for a while, but was eventually succumbed to that, and then left there. My two best friends in the firm and I left, and we started our own firm. And at that point, it's okay, we'll take any case we can get because we need money to pay the bills.
Yep.
So, which is what I really wanted, to just have a general practice and, be like Abe Lincoln, lawyer. help my fellow citizens with their legal problems, whatever they were. So that's what I did for the last 20 years.
Any interesting stories from those times?
Hundreds. I mean, when you have that kind of practice in a big city, and to be not too egotistical about it, but and you're pretty good, and you develop a reputation as a good lawyer. I had clients who were crack whores. I had clients who were Fortune 500 companies. I mean, just
people.
the broadest spectrum you can imagine. I mean, you never knew what was going to walk in the door in terms of the next case. So, I handled criminal cases. I did a lot of civil litigation, personal injury, divorces, estates, real estate, you name it. I did it as long as it could pay.
Okay, that's definitely a wide variety. Now, you also seem very involved in the Himalayas. How did that come about?
Well, I had turned 40 and was manifesting midlife crisis symptoms. And and my wife thought these midlife crisis symptoms were a real pain in her butt. So I came home from the office one day, and she slapped this brochure down in front of me on the table and said, "Why don't you go do this?" And it was trekking the Mount Everest Base Camp Trail. So hiking, not climbing, but hiking to Mount Everest. And so she was basically saying, "Buddy, go take a hike and do it on the other side of the world." So I thought that was a good idea. Told a good friend of mine about it, and we joined a trekking group, and we hiked the Base Camp Trail. And I fell in love with the mountains. I mean, I live in Indiana. There aren't any mountains here. And I'd driven across the Rockies, but I'd never really had any sort of mountaineering experience. But it was just the landscape is just unbelievably spectacular. And the other thing that really struck a chord with me is the people that live up in the high mountains, and the first tribe of those people I met were the Sherpas, who were kind of well known because of their guiding on Mount Everest. Were Sir Edmund Hillary described them as the strongest and kindest people in the world, because they're incredibly tough, strong, but they're also very sweet natured, just have this lovely, kind personality, and the ethic of you're not a stranger, you're a guest. And so I really liked being around those people and being up in the mountains. So I decided to learn how to be a mountain climber and go back. And then after I was over there a couple times, it really strikes you how poor Nepal is. It's the poorest country outside of Africa. There's a handful of countries in Africa that are even poorer. And then, if you fall in love with a country, you start wanting to give back. So I started doing sort of individual projects like bringing money for a school, or bringing school supplies or clothing, that kind of thing. And that just eventually evolved into a 501c3 Bassa Village Foundation.
How did you come up with the idea of philanthrotrekking?
Well, after a mountaineering adventure, and this would have been, I think, in 2003, maybe, which was the 50th anniversary of the first summit of Mount Everest by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay Sherpa. a bunch of us, after we were back in Kathmandu, and we're sitting around, and we were all talking, and we were all from different climbing groups and trekking groups, and there were about 10 of us, eating dalbat, the local food, and drinking the Sherpa tea. And it struck us that all of us, every single one of the people at this table, was not only into climbing and trekking, but also was doing some kind of philanthropic work in Nepal. And so I just sort of, it just struck me. I said, well, we're all philanthro-trekkers. We do philanthro-trekking, and coined that phrase, that term. And if you Google that term, you'll actually see it being used by other people and in books and websites and so forth.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, you've done so much in your life. It's quite admirable that you. It's like a lot of people would hang it up at at a few nonprofits and coining a phrase. But what is it that keeps you going?
When I was fairly young, I developed sort of an attitude, I guess, towards life that I thought my own life should be like an art project. And I would try to create something interesting and beautiful and good. And so I sort of try to have a balance of doing, good things, living in a beautiful way, and also having adventures. And so one thing is I have to give credit to some extent to athletics. I've always played a lot of sports. I played 3 sports through junior high and high school, played football, rugby, swam in college, and having a sort of competitive attitude of wanting to, kind of conquer, win, but with a team, with comrades in arms. I think that also has played an important part in, creating this desire to achieve, to accomplish, but especially with other people in, some kind of a group, which has gone from playing on a team to being on a board, which doesn't, sound quite as competitive, adventurous. But it's, it's kind of the grown-up way of doing that.
Yeah, not as much ball spiking and celebrations.
Right. Also, not as dangerous to your body.
True.
Although some board meetings can get pretty brutal, but I haven't ever left a board meeting with a black eye or a broken bone. So there is that to say for it.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a positive there. Wow. Yeah, you've got let's see, you're reading multiple books. You teach philanthropy at the university level, and you're on several boards, including for the Vasa Foundation, Vasa Village Foundation, and Scientech. And wow, just so much. I don't know where to keep going. Uh, um, what about in your treks in the Himalayas? Any ever get any close calls with like avalanches and such? Or
Yeah.
Yeti?
Yep. Yeah. In fact, there's one of the most difficult experiences of my life was I was with a climbing team, and we were on a mountain called Mira Peak, in the Nepal Himalayas, and there were just a lot of avalanches that climbing season, and a number of people were killed in avalanches. And when we were trekking out, we couldn't climb the peak. The weather was just too bad. Nobody was able to summit. And we're trekking out, heading back to the village called Lukla that has an airstrip, so you fly in and out of Lukla from Kathmandu. And we got hit by an avalanche, and there were 5 of us. Our head guide, which is called a Sirdar, our Sirdar, and the 4 climbers, we ran for our lives with the avalanche chasing us down this mountain face, and we survived. Really, it was, we took some bumps and bruises, but nothing really serious. But our porters were trapped on the other side of the avalanche. So those are the guys that are carrying all the heavy stuff, our tents and the heavy climbing gear and so forth. And so they're trapped on the other side of this avalanche. So our guide says, okay, you guys, the 4 of you, you just hike on back to Lukla. And we knew that if we hike all day and into the night, we could get back to Lukla from where we were. And he was going to climb back over the avalanche, find the porters, and get them out somehow. So we made it back, and we were staying in this guest house lodge in Lukla waiting, and we waited for 3 days before our Sirdar's name was Seth, before Seth was able to come back. And all the porters survived. One was hurt, had to be carried. They were all really kind of beat up because there were 3 small rivers or creeks that we had to ford to get back to Lukla. And when we crossed them, it was ankle high or knee high. By the time they got to the deepest one, it was neck high, and they couldn't get across. I mean, they strung rope, couldn't make it. So they had to sleep out on the bank, soaking wet. And it gets well below 0 at night. But they made it. In the meantime, the lodge owner, the woman, you call the lodge owner the Didi, which means big sister in Nepali. The Didi's son was flying up from Kathmandu to Lukla, and his plane crashed, and everybody on board died in that plane crash. So we're waiting for our crew and our Sirdar. We don't know if they're, what condition they're in. And during those 3 days, her son dies in a plane crash, and this is who we're staying with. And it was a truly heartrending, awful experience. But one of the things that was so amazing is our guide, Seth, the just amazing strength and commitment to the guys that worked with him. I mean, he had run down that mountain with us, climbed back up, then had to carry the load of 2 porters who were too weak to carry their loads down the mountain, wait for them to recover. One of them was too hurt to carry. So Seth carried his own backpack and a porter's load, which is somewhere between 70 and 90 pounds, plus his probably 30-pound backpack, and helped the guy who was hurt, and spent 3 days getting out of that mess. So the Nepali guides that guide trekking and mountaineering teams are just the most amazing human beings I've ever met. Most of them speak multiple languages. They'll be at least somewhat fluent in the major European languages, plus English, plus their own Nepali language, and often Japanese, Chinese, because they have clients from all over the world. So that's one of the reasons I've always loved being involved, because those people are just so amazing.
I have great respect for anybody who can learn more than one language. That's one thing I've been unable to do myself. How about you? You speak any other languages?
Well, when I was in school, I studied the classics. So I took Latin, ancient Greek, Hebrew, and then I took 1 year of Spanish to learn something I could actually talk to other people. And since there aren't a lot of people that you can talk to in Latin, ancient Greek, or Hebrew, and I spent some time in Mexico on a motorcycle trip after that 1 year of Spanish, so I did get to use it. But I've learned some Nepali. I mean, I can carry on sort of a very basic conversation in Nepali, but I'm not, I'm really not fluent in any foreign language.
Okay. Yeah, sounds like me and my father. My father's a retired military chaplain. He served in the Army, in the Navy, then the Marines, then the Army. Then he went to the VA and worked at the hospital. But yeah, he had to learn Hebrew and Greek. And, I don't think he had to do Latin for his MDiv. But yeah, and if I go back to school, which I'm planning to do, then I'll probably have to learn Hebrew.
Bill, you're fading out. Can you turn your audio up? I can barely hear you.
Hold on.
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Of course.
It's up to you to answer because some people take it too personal about this. But are you a religious person?
That's a difficult question to answer in a yes or no, because I've studied, written a lot about religion. In fact, one of the 14 books I've written, the title is Godless: Living a Valuable Life Beyond Beliefs, which is an attack on traditional religion and religious organizations and all the things they do wrong, and how they mislead people. But I've gone to church my entire life. At one point, I was even a candidate for the Presbyterian ministry. I left the Presbyterian church, but I attend a Quaker meeting every Sunday. I don't really dig the answer of I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
Yeah.
Because in a way, I'm very religious. But in another way, I think most things that most religions do are counterproductive. So there's a long answer to a short question.
That's all right. But the reason I asked this is because I want to see if a religious person gets more motivated, or a person that has no religion, is he motivated? That's the reason I asked, because in myself, I wonder, people get motivated. And the reason, well, I'm religious, I love God, and I really thing. But the thing is, when I see somebody do good, I'm hoping that they have that calm of God in them. So that's the only reason I asked that question, and thank you very much for answering it. God bless you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important question, and I've known people who are motivated wonderfully because of their religious commitment. And I've known people who are atheists and agnostics who, do wonderfully good works. So I really I think it just depends on the person and, your life's journey, how it works out. I don't think religion is necessary to, or a religious commitment is necessary to live a good life and be a good person. But I do think you have to understand um, the ethic, the fundamental ethic that most religions advocate, which I think was summed up pretty well in both the Old Testament and the New Testament, which is love your neighbor as yourself, because what that implies is you have to love yourself. A lot of people forget that. Love your neighbor as yourself. You have to love yourself, take care of yourself, live a good life, but also love your neighbor. Now, the other part of that, if you're religious, of course, is that and love God with all your heart, mind, etc. But you don't need that part of the equation to fulfill the first part of the equation.
Yeah, yeah. Although we love God because He first loved us, of course. But yeah, as far as religion goes, Jesus was not particularly for the religious organizations of his day, and I think we can take a lot of lesson from that, the hypocrisy and misleading, as you said, of some preachers.
Yeah, in that book I mentioned, I make sort of contradictory cases. On the one hand, I argue and present, I think, compelling evidence that religions are responsible for some of the most wonderful things that have ever occurred in human history. But art, architecture, music, etc., as well as motivating people to do good works. And on the other hand, I think they're also guilty of some of the worst crimes in human history. The religious wars, the what's come out about all of the sexual abuse by not only Catholic priests but Baptist ministers, and every religion has pretty well been proven to have people in it that are not only not following the ethics of the religion, but are engaged in downright evil, awful practices. So it's it's a wonderful thing and it's an awful thing. And so I sort of in that book present a way that if religion, an organized religion, could just be, devoted to the good things that religions have done without the bad things, but a fundamental rule for that, which I'm guessing both of you would disagree with, and most people who are committed to a religion or a faith disagree with, is you have to get rid of all beliefs. As soon as you set a number of beliefs and say you have to believe A, B, and C to be in, you got to believe A, B, and C to be a good Christian or to be a good Jew or to be a good Hindu or whatever, Muslim. You've now cut off a whole lot of other people, and you have claimed that you know the truth and you're better than anybody who doesn't agree with you. And so I would eliminate any beliefs from this utopian religion that I advocate in my book. And instead of focusing on beliefs, we would focus on practice, where we would engage in the wonderful things that religious practices do, like singing, dancing, meditating, all of that, those sorts of things. And we would be a harmonious community where we uplift each other and we do good works. So you start with eliminating beliefs. You're going to get rid of most of the problems that come out of religion, and you just focus on those good things that, everybody agrees that, okay, those things I just mentioned are good things. But people who are committed to different religions will say, no, but wait a minute, you have to believe A, B, and C. And then we're right back to the problem of you're in, I'm out, she's in, he's
A
out.
lot of Christians forget that Paul said, "When at all possible, live at peace with everyone." I think goes a long way to reaching that, or would if people would pay attention to it. There's so much non-peace out there. I mean, you can't really say war necessarily. It's not all that bad. But yeah, if you forget to live at peace with others, then yeah, you definitely get those kinds of things. Yeah, I think I would say you don't have to get rid of all of the beliefs, but but there are definitely some man-made traditions that need to go.
Well, it's kind of like this. I don't care if you believe that you should love your neighbor as yourself, but I care a whole lot if you practice it.
Right. Well, that's in there. That's in there too. James addresses a lot of the people who were just believing and not acting on it.
Right, and I think if somebody who practices the ideals that Jesus and the early Christians were advocating, you would have exactly what I'm talking about. Although you also would have a set of core beliefs, because they believed Jesus was their savior, they believed Jesus was coming back, etc. But again, as soon as you put that into the mix, you've now excluded everybody who doesn't believe that, even though all these other people would agree with the fundamental ethic and the things you're doing, what you're actually doing. And so that's why I get rid of beliefs, problem solved. I don't get many religious people who agree with me, but the Quakers tolerate me.
Okay. Well, they are the Friends, after all.
They call themselves the Friends. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, you've written 14 books, is it?
Yes.
Okay, we've talked about one. What types of books do you generally write?
All sorts of different books. I've written a few novels. I've written sort of historical treatises, philosophical arguments, philosophical, theological, sort of, trying to make an argument. So it's just like my law practice covers a wide variety of genres.
So it is definitely a compliment to you when someone calls you what is it? Jack of all trades. Yeah,
I've been called a lot of things. That's one of them.
That's really cool. Yeah, okay. I don't know where that came from, but yeah. Don't want to overload everybody on all of your stuff that you do. So yeah, so I'll wrap it up. I usually ask my guests, do you have any last words for the nice people?
Sure. Live a beautiful, adventurous life and love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
That sounds good.
Thank you guys for hosting me.
Oh, my pleasure. Our
Nice
pleasure.
talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah, the pleasure was all ours. Yeah, just such an interesting person. I'd love to have you on again.
Happy to do it again.
Great. Yeah, with that, I will tell the people to remember to be safe out there, wash your hands, and watch the ending credits.
Thank you all for tuning in.
This has been a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. I'd like to thank my producer, my beloved mother, Eileen Hatch. I, of course, am your humble host. I'd like to thank my very special guest, Jeff Rasley. Support the show if you feel so led over on patreon.com. We're known as Bald Spots Pro. Don't you dare miss YWL Online. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever fine podcasts are offered. Be sure to tune in next time when my guests will be Cletus R. Bulach and Sally Gimmon.
Be sure to like, comment, and share. Subscribe, follow, whatever it is you've got to do to kick that algorithm into gear and help us reach more people.
If you or someone you know needs support now, call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. That is the suicide and crisis lifeline here in the United States.